Her world had shrunk to the weight of an urn and the silence of her son's empty room, until the doorbell rang, and a stranger in a $5,000 suit said her son's final act saved his life. He opened a briefcase. Inside weren't stacks of cash, but legal documents that would unravel everything she thought she knew about her child's death and her own future. The visitor was Marcus Thorne, a tech billionaire whose own survival hinged on a secret registry. Her son, a 20-year-old college student named Elijah, had listed himself as an organ donor. But what Thorne revealed next was a story Elijah had never told, a final act of courage that would force his mother to confront a system where grief, ethics, and immense wealth collide. This is the true story of what was inside that briefcase, and why one mother's understanding of her son's death was only the beginning. For Anya Reynolds, the 3 months since the police knock had been a slow dismantling. Every morning, she'd wake to the same suffocating quiet in her modest Baltimore row house, the silence where her son's laughter used to be. Elijah was her only child, a sophomore engineering student at Morgan State with a smile that could disarm a room. He worked part-time at a computer repair shop, saved for a used car, and told his mother he was going to build something that mattered. The accident was a blur of late-night phone calls and sterile hospital hallways. A hit-and-run driver, no witnesses, his motorcycle a tangled piece of scrap metal on North Avenue. He was declared brain dead 2 days later. Anya had made the decision alone in a family consultation room that smelled of antiseptic and old coffee. She remembered the organ donation coordinator, a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes, explaining the process. Did she know her son's wishes? Anya nodded, numb. Elijah had checked the box on his driver's license at 18, telling her once, "It just makes sense, Mom. If I'm not using it, someone else should." She signed the forms. In the following days, cards arrived from the donation network, thanking her for her gift during a profound loss. They said her son's heart, liver, and kidneys had gone to 4 different recipients. She tried to find solace in that, but the hole he left was a physical thing, a cold, hollow space in the center of her life. She returned to her job as a medical billing specialist, the numbers on her screen blurring into a meaningless haze. The stack of final bills from the hospital began to arrive, incidentals not covered by his modest student insurance. $23,000, a sum that felt astronomical as she stared at the statements on her kitchen table, next to the urn containing his ashes. Then, 3 months to the day after the funeral, the doorbell rang. Marcus Thorne stood on her porch. She recognized him vaguely from business magazines, the founder of Ether Dynamics, a titan in quantum computing. His net worth was often listed in the billions. He was calm, somber, and asked if he could come in. He told her he was Elijah's heart recipient. He explained that after a transplant, recipients can write anonymous letters to donor families through the registry. He had. But he said he needed to deliver his gratitude in person, because the standard story wasn't the whole truth. "Your son didn't just save my life," Thorne said, his voice low. "He exposed a fatal flaw in the system that saved me." He placed the black briefcase on her coffee table and clicked it open. Inside was not money, but a bound legal dossier and a slim, sealed medical device. The official record says Elijah was a donor following a tragic accident. "This," he said, tapping the dossier, "shows he was also a witness, and that someone wanted to make sure he could never speak." Anya's world, already fractured, tilted on a new axis. What was he talking about? Thorne explained that during his own pre-transplant workup, his private medical team had run a novel, proprietary analysis on the donor heart. It was a cellular-level diagnostic he'd invested millions in developing. The analysis revealed trace biochemical markers inconsistent with a simple trauma. Markers that suggested Elijah had been exposed to a specific, rare toxin in the hours before his death. A toxin used in industrial espionage. "I've spent the last 12 weeks investigating," Thorne said. "Your son was interning at my company, Ether Dynamics, not in the main offices, but at a secured subsidiary called Kronos Labs. He was one of maybe 40 people who had access to a prototype we were developing. 2 weeks before his accident, a security audit flagged irregular data access. Someone was trying to exfiltrate specifications. Elijah reported a suspicious approach from a fellow intern. He was helping internal security. Anya felt the room tighten. Elijah had never mentioned an internship at a tech giant. He said he landed a great summer gig at a startup incubator. He'd been excited, secretive. She'd assumed it was just him being a nerdy 20-year-old. Thorne slid a photograph from the dossier. It showed Elijah, smiling, with a group of other young people in casual clothes outside a sleek, modern building. The logo on the building was Ether Dynamics. The police report called it a random hit and run, Thorne continued. No suspects, no vehicle recovered. My security team pulled traffic camera footage from 6 blocks away. It shows a vehicle matching the description circling the neighborhood for 20 minutes before the incident. This wasn't random, Ms. Reynolds. This was a cleanup operation. They didn't know he was a donor. They just knew he was a potential leak that needed to be silenced. The weight of it crashed down. Her son's death wasn't an accident. It was a murder disguised as one. And the very act that had taken his life, his donation, had also, impossibly, carried the evidence of that crime into the body of one of the most powerful men in the country. Thorne then revealed the true purpose of his visit beyond the horrific truth. The law, the National Organ Transplant Act of 1984, forbids any valuable consideration for an organ. I cannot pay you for your son's heart, but I am legally entitled to pursue justice for the attempted murder of the person whose organ now sustains me. My life is literally evidence. These documents, he said, pointing to the briefcase, constitute a binding legal agreement. I am placing my entire legal team and investigative resources at your disposal. We will find who did this. And this, he pointed to the medical device, is a trust instrument. The proceeds from the patent for the diagnostic that found the evidence in my chest will flow into a foundation in Elijah's name. It will cover every debt from his death and ensure you never have to worry again. It's not payment for an organ. It is the restitution from a crime directed to the victim's family. Anya was trembling. Grief was now fused with a white-hot rage. She looked from the earnest, grieving billionaire to the photo of her smiling son. One question burned louder than all others. If Elijah died because he saw something he shouldn't have at Chronos Labs, what was so valuable that it was worth killing for? And more chillingly, was the person who ordered the hit still inside the building, watching as Marcus Thorne and a grieving mother started asking questions. The quiet investigation began the next morning, not in a police precinct, but from the 32nd floor of the Ether Dynamics Tower. Anya Reynolds, a medical billing specialist from Baltimore, found herself in a situation she could never have imagined. Seated across from Marcus Thorne in a conference room with a view of the city, she listened as he mapped out a shadow war. On one side, his private security team, led by a former federal agent named David Chen. On the other, an unknown entity with the resources to orchestrate a murder and the savvy to make it look like street crime. We proceed on 2 tracks, Thorne explained, his fingers steepled. Track 1 is legal and above board. My attorneys are filing a petition to have your son's case reopened as a potential homicide based on new evidence, the toxicology from the donor heart analysis. That will be slow. Track 2 is what we do in the meantime. We find the leak. We find the pressure point. Anya's first task was to access Elijah's digital life. Thorne's tech team provided her with a secure laptop. With a few keystrokes, David Chen bypassed the standard cloud security protocols. Suddenly, Anya was scrolling through her son's private messages, his photos, his search history. It felt like a violation and a profound intimacy. She saw the excitement in his texts to a friend. This internship is next level. Can't talk about it, but it's gonna change everything. She saw calendar entries for Chronos Lab Sector 7 clearance. And then she found the drafts. In a notes app, Elijah had been jotting down thoughts in a private, unsynced folder. One entry, dated a week before his death, read, "The moral math doesn't add up. The efficiency gain is undeniable, but the application vector. Asked Dr. Aris today about fail-safes. He got nervous, told me to focus on my assigned module. But if the core function can be repurposed, who controls the purpose? Another note was more direct. Met with internal security, told them about Raj's questions. He was asking about access protocols for the neural mapping database, not our department. Felt like he was fishing. Security said they'd handle it. Hope I didn't just get the guy fired. Raj, Anya looked up, her heart pounding. Who is Raj? David Chen was already typing. Raj Mehta, 22, another intern in the Chronos program. He was terminated for policy violations the day after Elijah's meeting with security. Chen pulled up Raj's employee file. His photo showed a young man with sharp, intelligent eyes. His termination paperwork was sparse, citing unauthorized data access. But there was no police report, no further action. We need to talk to him, Anya said, the words feeling foreign and powerful in her mouth. Thorne nodded. Chen. 3 hours later, Anya was in the back of a discreet sedan being driven to a modest apartment complex in Silver Spring, Maryland. David Chen sat beside her. We've made initial contact. He's scared. He'll talk to you because you're Elijah's mother. He wouldn't talk to me. Raj Mehta answered the door looking like he hadn't slept in weeks. His apartment was a studio, dominated by computer monitors. He saw Anya, saw the resemblance in her face, and his shoulders slumped. I was wondering when someone would come, he said, his voice hollow. Over bitter instant coffee, Raj told his story. He and Elijah had been paired on a submodule of the Chronos project. Raj's job was data optimization. Elijah's was interface design. The project, Raj explained, was officially billed as a next-generation predictive algorithm for logistics and supply chain management. A boring, billion-dollar problem. But the data sets we were training it on, they weren't shipping manifests, Raj whispered, leaning forward. They were synaptic maps, medical scans, population-level behavioral data. Elijah figured it out first. He said the core wasn't about predicting where a shipping container would be. It was about predicting where a person would be, what they would think what they would do based on 1,000 subtle inputs. A behavioral crystal ball. He said a senior scientist, Dr. Linus Aris, had cautioned them to stay in their lane. But then Raj had noticed anomalous code patches, pieces of programming that seemed designed to hide the algorithm's true processing layers. Out of curiosity, he tried to trace one. That's when he'd asked Elijah about the neural database access. He'd been caught, flagged by the very system they were working on. The day after I was fired, Raj said, his hands shaking, I got a visit not from security, from a man in a suit. He gave me a burner phone with one number in it. He said if I ever spoke about my work to anyone, the phone would ring. And when it rang, I should answer it if I cared about my family back in Mumbai. He hadn't touched the phone. It sat in a drawer, a silent threat. Who was the man? Chen asked. He didn't give a name, but he had an ID badge. It was Etha. It was for a private military contractor called Griffon Security. The name landed in the room like a stone. Thorne, listening via a secure audio feed in the car outside, immediately spoke into Anya's earpiece. Griffon has a standing contract with our defense division. They handle physical security for some of our overseas assets. They should not have been anywhere near Chronos. The pieces were drifting into a terrifying pattern. A secret project with dual-use potential. An intern who asks too many questions, fired. Another who goes to security, silenced permanently. And a private military company acting as corporate enforcers. Back at Etha Tower, Thorne was furious. This isn't just industrial espionage. This is a black op inside my own company. He convened an emergency meeting with his most trusted board member, Eleanor Vance, and his general counsel. The counsel was immediately cautious. Marcus, if Griffon is involved off the books, that implies coordination with someone very senior internally. We go public with this now without ironclad proof. We risk the entire company. The stock, the contracts, everything. Alina Vance, a steely woman in her 60s, had a different view. What's at risk is more than the stock price. If Kronos is what these kids think it is, and it's being weaponized or prepared for sale to a bad actor, the liability is existential. We need to audit Kronos, top to bottom. But when Thorne ordered the audit, he hit his first major wall. Dr. Linus Aris, the project lead, refused. He cited proprietary research protocols and national security non-disclosure agreements Thorne himself had signed. The Kronos lab servers were physically and digitally isolated from the main Ether network. Access required multiple keyholders, and Aris was one. Thorne's authority, absolute in most of his empire, meant nothing in this sealed compartment. "You created a monster with too much autonomy," Alina told him bluntly. "To protect it from competitors, you walled it off. Now the walls are protecting something else." Anya, meanwhile, was navigating her own surreal reality. The foundation in Elijah's name was established with breathtaking speed. The medical bills vanished, paid in full. But the money felt like blood money. She couldn't touch it. She moved through her days in a haze of grief and grim purpose, scouring Elijah's effects at home. She found a hidden compartment in his engineering textbook. Inside was a cheap, encrypted USB drive. It took Thorne's team 2 days to crack it. On it was a single audio file. Anya pressed play. It was Elijah's voice, low and hurried, recorded on a phone. "Mom, if you're hearing this, something went wrong. I'm probably being paranoid. The project, it's called Kronos, but it's not about time. It's about control. They're building a key that can unlock any human decision-making process. They say it's for marketing, for policy planning. But the underlying code, it has directives I didn't write. Backdoors. I found a module called Knight's Move. It's a protocol for forced behavioral compliance. I showed my concerns to Dr. Aris. He told me I was brilliant and that I should forget what I saw, that the world wasn't ready for this conversation, but he was scared. I think someone above him is calling the shots. I'm going to take what I have to internal security tomorrow. I love you. Remember that." The recording ended. The room was silent. Elijah hadn't just been a witness. He'd been a whistleblower, leaving a message in a bottle for his mother. And the next day, he was dead. This changed everything. It was no longer just about murder to cover espionage. It was about murder to conceal a technological Pandora's box. Thorne looked physically ill. A Knight's Move protocol, that's a chess term for a non-linear, unexpected attack. My God, what have they built? The decision was made. They had to get inside Kronos' lab physically. The audit was blocked, the digital doors sealed. But Thorne still had one card to play, his status as a heart transplant recipient. He scheduled an emergency medical checkup at the on-site Ether corporate health clinic, which shared a utility corridor with the Kronos Lab's clean room ventilation system. It was a flimsy pretext, but it would get him and David Chen onto the secured campus. Anya insisted on coming. "He's my son," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "I see this through." The plan was high risk. During Thorne's exam, Chen would disable a specific security camera loop for a 90-second window. Anya, wearing a contractor's badge hastily fabricated by Chen's team, would enter the utility corridor, plant a series of nanodata taps on the lab's internal network cables, and get out. The taps would beam everything to Chen's servers. On the day, everything was a nerve-wracking ballet. Anya's hands were cold as she clutched a toolbox filled with false-bottomed equipment. She rode the service elevator, her heart hammering against her ribs. The corridor was sterile, lit by pale LEDs, humming with the sound of massive air handlers. She found the junction box Chen had mapped out. She had 45 seconds left. She pried the cover open, her fingers fumbling with the specialized connectors. Just as the last tap snapped into place, a voice echoed down the corridor. "Maintenance isn't scheduled for this sector." She froze. Turning slowly, she saw a man in a Griffon security uniform, his hand resting on the butt of his holstered sidearm. His eyes narrowed, looking from her face to her badge, which didn't match the face that should have been on it. He reached for his radio. "All units, potential breach in Utility Alpha. I have a female unauthorized." He never finished the sentence. From behind a large conduit, David Chen moved like a shadow. A quick, precise motion and the guard slumped, caught before he hit the floor. Chen's face was grim. The radio call went out. "We have maybe 2 minutes before this place is locked down tighter than a tomb. Go, back the way you came." They ran, leaving the unconscious guard in the corridor. Alarms began to blare, a piercing, rhythmic whoop. Anya's lungs burned. They burst out of a service exit into a loading dock, where a car was waiting, engine running. They screeched away just as more Griffon vehicles converged on the building. Back at the safe house, they were safe for the moment, but they had tripped a wire. The opposition now knew someone was coming for Kronos, and they were willing to break in to get it. The data taps, however, were live, and as the feeds began to populate Chen's screens, they saw something that made the entire risk worth it. They saw internal communications between Dr. Aris and someone with the codename Patron. They were discussing a live field test of the Knight's Move protocol. The target was not a foreign adversary. It was a list of 5,000 American citizens. The test was scheduled for the following week, embedded in a popular social media platform's ad algorithm. The goal? To see if they could increase specific, measurable behavioral compliance, like signing a petition or changing a shopping habit, by a statistically impossible margin, without a single subject realizing they were being guided. Elijah had been right, and the project had moved far beyond theory. It was now in final testing, days from being deployed on an unsuspecting public. But the most chilling line in the communications was from Patron regarding the recent security breach. "The Reynolds complication persists. The maternal vector is active. Cleanup failed once. It must not fail again. The heart is the key. Remove the key." They weren't just after the secret anymore. The directive was clear. They had tried to kill Elijah and failed to silence the truth permanently. Now they were coming for Marcus Thorne, because the evidence of their crime and the only living witness to the project's original sin was beating inside his chest. The safe house, a sleek but anonymous condo in Arlington, became a bunker. The revelation that Thorne himself was now a primary target changed the calculus of everything. He was no longer just the billionaire benefactor. He was the living evidence. His security detail tripled. David Chen presented a grim assessment. They failed to silence Elijah permanently because they didn't account for organ donation. They won't make that mistake twice. An extraction of the evidence means extraction of the organ. They will come for you, and they will not need you alive. Anya watched as the man who had walked into her living room with calm authority was suddenly caged by his own protection. The irony was vicious. His wealth and power, which had seemed like an unstoppable force, had built the very walls that now trapped him. She felt a surge of something beyond grief, a fierce, protective anger. This man carried her son's heart. In a way she couldn't fully articulate, keeping him safe felt like keeping a part of Elijah alive. But they couldn't just hide. The data taps were a fire hose of information, and Chen's team worked around the clock. They mapped the Knight's Move field test. It was horrifyingly elegant. The protocol would be inserted as a seemingly benign software update to a popular social media platform's advertising algorithm, one that Etha's analytics division had a partnership with. 5,000 users, selected for specific psychological profiles, would be shown a sequence of curated content over 48 hours. The content was designed to induce a subtle, measurable shift in opinion on a neutral, non-political issue. In this case, a preference for a specific brand of bottled water over another. The success metric wasn't just ad clicks, but a verifiable change in stated preference in follow-up surveys, a change the subjects would believe was their own original thought. "It's a proof of concept," Chen said, his face illuminated by the glow of 3 monitors. "If you can make someone choose Aqua Pure over Mountain Spring without them knowing why, You can make them believe anything, or vote for anyone. They had to stop the test, but going public was still impossible. Thorne's lawyers reiterated the doom scenario. Without irrefutable court-admissible proof of the murder link, Ether Dynamics would be torn apart by lawsuits and the government would seize the Chronos technology, burying it in some black budget program. Elijah's death would be a footnote. The only path was to expose the conspiracy from the inside, and to do that, they needed to identify Patron. The digital trail led to a maze of offshore shell companies and encrypted dead ends. But Anya, thinking with a mother's memory, suggested a different approach. Elijah said Dr. Aris was scared, that someone above him was calling the shots. What if we make Aris more scared of us than he is of them? The plan was audacious. Using the Foundation's resources, they created a fictitious biotech research firm. They reached out to Dr. Linus Aris with an offer, a lucrative consulting position, a chance to jump from what the letter hinted was a sinking ship. The hook was a fabricated news article, planted on a credible-looking tech blog, suggesting turbulence and a potential federal audit in Etha's defense contracting division. They needed to flush him out to see if he'd run. He didn't run. He sent a terse, legalistic refusal, but he made a mistake. He accessed the fake firm's website from his private home network, not his secured Ether terminal. That was all Chen needed. Once inside Aris's home network, they found his personal life, a trove of insecurities, financial worries despite his high salary, anxiety over his daughter's college tuition, and a series of encrypted messages to a single, unlisted number. Chen couldn't decrypt the messages, but he could trace the number. It didn't lead to a person. It led to a secure server farm in Luxembourg, registered to a holding company. That company, after 6 hours of forensic accounting by Thorne's financial team, was found to be a conduit. Its ultimate beneficiary was a trust, and the name on the trust was one that made the blood drain from Thorne's face: Billionaire Vance. His most trusted board member, his friend of 20 years, the woman who had urged caution, who had warned him about the walls he'd built around Chronos. Patron was in his inner circle. It makes a sick kind of sense, Thorne said, his voice hollow with betrayal. She oversees our mergers and acquisitions. She has the connections to Griffon, to the defense world. She knew about my heart condition. She knew I was on the list. She could have accelerated my placement. She could have ensured I received Elijah's heart. The implication was monstrous. Had Vance not just covered up a murder, but orchestrated the transfer of evidence directly into the chest of the one man whose death could be explained by medical fragility? A man who, if he died of natural causes or transplant rejection, would take the secret with him. This was the wait, it gets worse moment. The conspiracy wasn't just a rogue project. It was a coup within Thorne's own empire. Vance was positioning herself to seize control of Ether and its crown jewel, a weaponized predictive technology she could sell to the highest bidder, be it a foreign power or a political faction. Confrontation was now inevitable and incredibly dangerous. Thorne called an emergency board meeting under the pretext of discussing the security breach at Chronos' lab. He would face Vance directly, with Chen's team monitoring and recording everything. It was a trap, but one where the bait was Thorne himself. Anya insisted on being there. I want to look her in the eye, she said, her tone leaving no room for debate. She would pose as a new member of Thorne's personal medical team, given his post-transplant sensitivities. The boardroom was a temple of glass and cold light. Billionaire Vance arrived last, calm and impeccably dressed. When Thorne laid out the facts, the murder, the toxin, the night's move protocol, the other board members erupted in shock and denial. Vance remained still, a small, polite smile on her face. These are extraordinary allegations, Marcus, she said, her voice smooth. Born from grief, perhaps, and from the understandable paranoia of a man who has recently undergone a traumatic medical procedure. You've brought a stranger into this chamber, she said, gesturing to Anya. A grieving mother whom you've clearly filled with these fantasies. It's tragic. It's also a profound breach of governance. Thorne played his card. The data from Chronos, Alina, we have it. We have your communications with Aris, the patron directives. For the first time, a flicker of something cold passed behind Vance's eyes, but she didn't crumble, she adapted. If you have illicitly obtained data from a secured, classified project, Marcus, then you have broken countless laws and endangered national security. The Department of Defense has been briefed on the Kronos project's defensive applications. Any leak is a threat to this country. She turned to the other board members. Our CEO is compromised. His health, his judgment, his recent entanglement with this tragedy. I move for a temporary medical leave of absence for his own well-being and the security of the company. It was a brilliant counterstrike. She reframed the whistleblower as a mentally compromised liability. The board, terrified of scandal and government intervention, began to murmur in agreement. Thorne was losing the room. He was losing his company. Then Anya spoke. She hadn't planned to. The words just came raw and clear. My son's name was Elijah Reynolds. He was 20 years old. He liked building robots and his mother's mac and cheese. He checked a box on a form because he thought it was the right thing to do. You had him killed for it. You're hiding behind flags and contracts and national security, but you're just a thief. You stole his life, and you're trying to steal the future from everyone in this country by deciding what they think. She looked at each board member. You're voting to cover up a murder. How does that fit on your annual report? The room froze. Vance's mask slipped for a second, revealing pure, undiluted contempt. Your emotional outburst is noted, she said icily. Security, please escort this woman out. But as Griffon personnel moved toward Anya, Thorne stood. Touch her, and every byte of data we have goes to the Washington Post in 60 seconds. It's in a dead man's switch, Alina. You know I've set one up. You can vote me out, but you can't stop the truth. A standoff. The board was paralyzed. Vance realized brute force wouldn't work here. She needed to regroup. The meeting dissolved in chaos with no vote taken. But the lines were drawn. War was declared inside Ether Dynamics. That night the retaliation came, not with guns but with code. The data taps were discovered and destroyed. Chen's servers were hit with a devastating cyber attack, wiping out terabytes of compiled evidence. They had backups, but the message was clear. Vance could reach them anywhere. Worse, the night's move field test was moved up. It was now scheduled to begin in 36 hours. Vance was forcing her hand, demonstrating the power of the technology to her unseen buyers, proving it worked even under pressure. With the digital evidence gutted and Thorne's authority crumbling, they had one desperate move left. They had to get physical proof. They needed a hardware source, the core server inside Chrono's lab where the original, unaltered code was stored, the code that would show the murderous directives and Vance's ownership. And they needed someone on the inside to get it. Raj Mehta, the fired intern, was the only candidate. He was terrified, but the sight of Anya's unwavering resolve and Thorne's promise of full asylum and protection for his family finally moved him. Elijah was my friend, he said simply. I should have done more then. The plan was a last-ditch heist. Raj still had his old keycard. Security protocols would have been updated, but Chen had a theory. Griffon's takeover of internal security might have created a gap. Their systems were geared toward keeping corporate spies out, not dealing with a familiar face with legitimate, if revoked, credentials trying to get asterisk in asterisk. It was a paradox of security. Raj would walk in during a shift change, exploiting a brief window where the system might flag him for a human review rather than an automatic lockdown. Once inside, he would need to reach the core server room, download the source code to a shielded drive, and get out. The window was 12 minutes. The night of the operation, Anya waited with Thorne and Chen in a van 3 blocks away, watching feeds from Raj's glasses camera. They saw the familiar lobby, the guard desk. Raj swiped his card. A red light flashed. He held his breath. The guard looked at his screen, frowned, then picked up a phone. This was it. Human review. They heard Raj's voice calm through the mic. "Hey Mike, it's Raj Mehta. I know my card, probably deactivated. I left my personal tablet in Lab 7. Dr. Aris said I could swing by and grab it. It's got all my thesis work on it." A pause. "Yeah, huge pain, just 5 minutes, I swear." A agonizing silence stretched. Then the guard's voice muffled, "Make it quick, I have to escort you." They were in, but now they had a tail. Raj, with a Griffon guard following him, moved through the sterile halls. He couldn't go directly to the server room. He led the guard to his old workspace, fumbled through a drawer and produced an old tablet. "Got it. Thanks, man." But instead of heading out, Raj feigned a memory. "Oh, shoot. I also need to grab the charging cable from the supply closet in the server wing. It's a proprietary connector. 2 seconds." The guard, impatient, nodded. At the door to the high-security server wing, Raj used a second piece of legacy tech, a biometric bypass code that Elijah had discovered and shared with him, a backdoor for maintenance that hadn't been patched. The door hissed open. The guard, not authorized for this wing, stayed outside. "1 minute, Raj." Inside the cold, humming room, Raj found the core server. His hands flew across the interface. The download bar crawled across his screen. 70%, 80. Outside, they heard the guard's voice grow suspicious. "Mehta, you good in there?" 95%. The drive chimed, "Download complete." Raj yanked it out, turned, and walked back to the door. He opened it with a smile. "All set, thanks for your patience." They were halfway to the lobby when the alarms went off. Not the breach alarm. A different, more urgent sound. A fire alarm. Sprinklers activated. Chen, in the van, grinned. "That's our distraction. A small electrical fault in a junction box on the floor below." In the chaos of evacuating personnel, Raj slipped out a side exit, the drive burning a hole in his pocket. He had done it. They had the Holy Grail, the uneditable source code that contained every crime, every directive, every connection to Vance. Back at the safe house, as Chen began verifying the data, Thorne received a direct call on his encrypted line. It was Eleanor Vance. Her voice was calm, devoid of its earlier corporate polish. "You have something that belongs to me, Marcus. It belongs to the memory of a boy you murdered, Eleanor." "Semantics. Here is the new reality. You have the code. I control the infrastructure, the partnerships, and the narrative. You try to expose me. I unleash Knight's move not on 5,000 people, but on 50 million. I will trigger a customized, algorithmically driven wave of panic and misinformation that will make the last election look like a tea party. Society is a fragile system, Marcus. I have the wrench. Hand over the drive, and you and the grieving mother can walk away. You keep your life, I keep my project." It was the ultimate escalation. She was no longer threatening a company or a cover-up. She was threatening to break reality itself, to use the weapon to create chaos on a national scale as a smokescreen. The stakes were no longer about justice for one murder. They were about preventing a silent, algorithmic coup against the public mind. Thorne looked at Anya, at the drive containing the truth about her son. The weight of the decision was astronomical. Give up the evidence and let a killer win, or risk triggering a social catastrophe to bring her down. The clock on the field test was still ticking, a smaller-scale rehearsal for the havoc Vance promised. He had 30 minutes to give her his answer. The briefcase that had started it all sat on the table, its contents now a catalyst for a crisis that threatened to engulf them all. The battle for justice had just become a war for the future of free will itself. The 30-minute deadline hung in the safe house like a physical weight. Marcus Thorne looked from the encrypted drive in his hand to Anya Reynolds, whose face was a mask of resolve. "We don't negotiate with terrorists," she said, her voice quiet but absolute. "She killed my son. She doesn't get to hold the world hostage, too." But the problem was tactical. Vance controlled the infrastructure. Even if they released the code to the media, the time lag before public outrage translated to action was a window she could use to execute her chaos protocol. They needed to sever her control at the source, immediately. David Chen, studying the architecture of the Knight's Move system from the stolen code, saw a vulnerability. It's built on a neural network model that requires a continuous, authenticated handshake from the central command server. If we can physically destroy that server, the entire protocol becomes inert code. It can't be deployed. The core server was in the Chronos lab, the same room Raj had just left. Vance would have it heavily guarded now. A direct assault was impossible, but Thorne remembered something. During the construction of the Ether campus, he had insisted on redundant utility tunnels for maintenance, a lesson from a blackout at an early startup. One of those tunnels ran directly beneath the Chronos Lab's server room. It was sealed and forgotten, but the blueprint still existed in the original architectural plans, which were stored off-network in Thorne's personal archives. There were 22 minutes left. Thorne accessed the archives. Chen located the tunnel entrance, a secured maintenance hatch in a sub-basement parking garage. It would bypass all the main security checkpoints, but they needed a way to destroy the server without setting off explosives that would collapse the building. Chen proposed an electromagnetic pulse device, a non-lethal tool his team used for sensitive electronics disruption. It would fry the server's core processors without a fire. It would also, however, knock out power in a quarter-mile radius and be highly illegal. "We do it," Thorne said. "The legal consequences are a problem for later. Right now, we have to kill the monster." Anya insisted on coming. "I started this with you. I end it with you." With 18 minutes to spare, they moved. Dressed in maintenance uniforms, Thorne, Anya, and Chen descended into the damp, forgotten tunnel. The air was thick and cold. They moved quickly, following the blueprints on a tablet. Above them, they could feel the vibration of the building's machinery. After 5 minutes of hurried walking, Chen stopped. "This is it. The server room should be about 20 feet above us, through this utility shaft." He set the EMP device, a compact, disc-shaped object at the base of the shaft. It was on a timer. They had 10 minutes to get clear before it discharged. As they turned to leave, a grating sound echoed down the tunnel. A security door at the far end, one that should have been locked, swung open. 2 Griffon operatives stepped through, weapons drawn. Vance had anticipated a move against the server and had guards in the tunnels. "Drop the device," one yelled. Time seemed to slow. Chen moved to shield Thorne and Anya. Thorne's mind raced. The EMP was their only shot. If they surrendered it, Vance won. Anya, acting on pure instinct, did something utterly unexpected. She stepped forward, directly into the line of fire, and spoke with a voice that cracked with maternal grief and fury. "My son's name was Elijah Reynolds. He's in this building. His heart is in that man's chest, and his murder is in your employer's ledger. You are pointing guns at a mother in a tunnel to protect a machine designed to erase free will. Look at what you're doing." The lead operative, a man in his 40s, faltered. His weapon dipped slightly. He had children. The sheer, human rawness of her statement pierced the professional facade. It was a split-second hesitation, but it was enough. From the shadows behind the guards, a figure emerged, Raj Mehta holding a fire extinguisher. He swung it hard against the knee of the second operative, who cried out and fell. The first operative spun, but Chen was already on him, disarming him in a swift, brutal motion. Raj, breathing heavily, looked at Anya. "I followed you. I couldn't just wait." They had 6 minutes. They left the 2 operatives tied in the tunnel and ran. They burst out of the maintenance hatch into the parking garage just as the EMP discharged. There was no sound, but every light in the garage flickered and died. Upstairs in the Chronos lab, every screen went black. The core server, along with every backup in the immediate array, was a melted, silent husk. Knight's Move was dead. Vance's phone call came 30 seconds later. Her voice was a furious snarl. "What have you done?" "We just performed a surgical strike, Alina," Thorne said, leaning against a concrete pillar, catching his breath. "Your weapon is offline. Permanently. And in about 60 seconds, every major news outlet and federal law enforcement agency is going to receive a data packet containing the source code, your communications as patron, the financial trails, and the security footage of your men pointing guns at a homicide witness in a utility tunnel. You're finished. He had set the dead man's switch to release the moment the EMP went off. There was no stopping it. The fallout was swift and public. The story broke like a dam. Tech billionaire exposes murder conspiracy within his company. Ether Dynamics board member arrested in plot to weaponize AI. The details of Elijah Reynolds, the heroic intern turned whistleblower, and his mother's relentless pursuit of the truth became a national narrative. The foundation in Elijah's name was highlighted not as charity, but as restitution from a crime, sidestepping the organ donation compensation laws. It was held up as a model. Eleanor Vance, Dr. Linus Aris, and 3 senior Griffon security officials were indicted on charges of murder, conspiracy, fraud, and violations of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Vance's defense crumbled when the full extent of her plans for the night's move protocol was presented. She was sentenced to life without parole. Marcus Thorne, while hailed as a hero for exposing the plot, faced severe regulatory scrutiny and shareholder lawsuits for the lack of oversight that allowed it to happen. He settled with the government by voluntarily dismantling the Kronos project and placing all related patents into the public domain, under strict ethical oversight. He stepped down as CEO of Ether Dynamics, remaining as chairman of the board to oversee the reform. His primary focus became the Elijah Reynolds Foundation. For Anya, the victory was bittersweet. Justice was served, but her son was still gone. The foundation, however, became her purpose. It didn't just pay off debts, it funded scholarships for engineering students from underserved communities, and it became a leading advocate for ethical oversight in predictive AI and for donor family rights. She found a surprising partnership with Thorne, built on shared grief and a shared mission. Then came the final, surprising detail. 6 months after the public exposure, Anya received a formal letter from the Department of Health and Human Services. It was a notification of a policy change. Citing the Reynolds case as a catalyst, a new federal pilot program was being established. It allowed for the provision of grief and transition support grants to families of organ donors, covering funeral expenses and incidental costs without constituting payment for organs. It was a direct, bureaucratic response to the moral paradox Thorne had navigated. Elijah's death had not only exposed a conspiracy, it had begun to change the system itself. One evening, Thorne visited Anya at her now paid-off row house. He brought dinner. They sat at her kitchen table, the same table where she'd once stared at hospital bills. He placed a small, wrapped box in front of her. Inside was a simple, elegant locket. When she opened it, she saw 2 tiny photos. One was of Elijah as a boy. The other was a microscopic image of cardiomyocytes, heart muscle cells. "That's a live cell culture," Thorne said softly. "Grown from a biopsy of my heart, from his heart. It's thriving in a lab at Johns Hopkins, part of a study on transplant longevity. They say it's one of the healthiest samples they've ever seen." Anya held the locket, tears in her eyes. It was a piece of her son, still alive, still beating, still doing good in the world. It was the promise of the briefcase realized. Not just financial security, but legacy, purpose, and a tangible connection to the life he had saved and the future he had helped secure. The story of the widow, the billionaire, and the briefcase was more than a tale of crime and punishment. It was a testament to how one act of selflessness, checking a box on a driver's license, could ripple outwards in ways no one could predict. It exposed a hidden darkness, yes, but it also forged an unlikely family, changed laws, and proved that even in the face of engineered silence, a mother's love and a stranger's conscience could rewrite the ending. The journey from that grief-stricken doorway to this moment of quiet resolution was long and harrowing, but it proved that the most powerful algorithms in the world are no match for the human heart, and that sometimes the most heroic act is simply to choose to see, to care, and to not look away. So what does the story of Anya, Elijah, and Marcus Thorne leave us with? Beyond the headlines and the courtroom drama, it leaves us with a profound question about the architecture of our own humanity. We live in a world increasingly built on systems, algorithms that predict us, financial instruments that define us, legal statutes that constrain us. These systems are designed to be efficient, to scale, to minimize friction. But as we saw, they can also be gamed, weaponized, and turned against the very people they were meant to serve. The workers' compensation maze that trapped Carol Hayes in our earlier story, and the organ transplant framework that became a battlefield in this one, are two sides of the same coin. They are systems that forget the human heartbeat at their center. Elijah Reynolds checked a box on a form, a simple bureaucratic act. He did it without fanfare, thinking of abstract strangers. That single checkmark set off a chain of events that toppled a conspiracy, changed federal policy, and proved that within even the most impersonal system, there is room for a single human decision to change everything. His mother, Anya, faced with the ultimate proof of system failure, her son's murder, refused to be ground down by it. She chose to see, to care, and to fight. And Marcus Thorne, a man who had built an empire within the system, realized that true power isn't in controlling the machine, but in having the courage to dismantle it when it becomes a monster. The lingering question for us is this: in our own lives, where are we simply checking boxes, moving through systems on autopilot? And where are we, perhaps without even realizing it, presented with a chance to be the human interruption, to be the person who looks up from the screen, who sees the individual behind the data point, who chooses the messy, complicated, and courageous path of connection over the clean, efficient path of indifference? Anya and Marcus's alliance was born from a tragedy, but it was sustained by a choice, repeated every day to show up, to listen, to not let grief or wealth or power become a wall, but to let it become a bridge. That is the real inheritance Elijah left. Not just a foundation or a locket, but a living example that our most vulnerable moments, our deepest grief, our most profound gratitude, can be the very things that connect us most powerfully to each other. Their story reminds us that every system is ultimately made of people, and people can be moved, they can be reached, they can change their minds. Even a guard in a tunnel, even a boardroom of skeptics, even a nation's policy. Change starts not with a loudspeaker, but with a whisper, a question, a hand extended across a threshold. If this story resonated with you, consider the quiet power you hold. The next time you see someone struggling, the next time you witness an injustice, the next time you're faced with a simple bureaucratic choice that feels meaningless, remember that you might be the unexpected link in a chain you cannot yet see. Your decision to engage, to care, to not look away, might be the one that changes everything for someone else. We create these stories to share meaningful life lessons with you. We are memory stories, and we are so glad you are here. If you want to be part of a community that believes in the power of human connection, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support helps us find and tell more stories like this one. Let us know in the comments, when was a time a simple, small act from someone else changed the course of your day or even your life? Have you ever been a donor or known someone whose life was saved by one? We would truly love to hear your story. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for caring. May you and your loved ones be safe, healthy, and guided by a compassion that sees past every system to the human heart at the center of it all. We'll see you in the next story.